Jake Sullivan cut the engine of his sleek black helicopter as it settled onto the newly constructed helipad behind his colonial-style home in Oak Ridge Estates. The former combat pilot wiped sweat from his brow, not from the flight, which was routine after thousands of hours in the cockpit, but from anticipation of the confrontation he knew was coming. Sure enough, before the rotors had fully stopped spinning, a woman in crisp khaki pants and a polo shirt embroidered with Oak Ridge HOA stormed across his lawn, her frosty blonde bob unmoved by the downwash. Patricia Wilkins, clipboard in hand, was already furiously scribbling what Jake assumed was his first official violation. "This is absolutely unacceptable," Patricia shouted over the dying whine of the turbines. "Do you have any idea what you've done to our community's aesthetic balance? The Johnson's garden party is ruined. Mrs. Abernathy's poodle is having a nervous breakdown." Jake jumped down from the cockpit, offering his hand with a practiced smile. "Jake Sullivan, ma'am. New homeowner and yes, helicopter pilot. I've got all the permits right here, including the HOA addendum I negotiated before purchase." Patricia recoiled from his handshake as if he'd offered her a dead fish. "Addendum? I never approved any addendum." She tapped her gold HOA president pin aggressively. "Nothing happens in Oak Ridge without my approval." As Jake pulled out a folder of meticulously organized paperwork, Patricia's eyes narrowed. The battle lines were drawn, and neither combatant realized they were standing on the precipice of a neighborhood legend in the making. The next HOA meeting transformed from its usual mundane discussions about lawn height specifications and approved mailbox colors into something resembling a courtroom drama. Patricia had prepared a PowerPoint presentation titled The Helicopter Menace: Property Values in Freefall, complete with poorly photoshopped images showing Jake's helicopter with added smoke and flames. Furthermore, Patricia continued, clicking to a slide with a grossly exaggerated sound wave diagram, "The noise pollution exceeds anything our community has ever experienced. It's like living next to an airport." Jake stood calmly when it was his turn to speak. "I've taken sound readings during takeoff and landing. My helicopter registers at 70 decibels from the nearest property line, quieter than Mrs. Wilkins' leaf blower, which I've measured at 85 decibels. He distributed actual scientific readings to the stunned residents. The meeting ended in chaos when Patricia dramatically collapsed into her chair, declaring she was suffering from helicopter-induced migraines and needed emergency chamomile tea. Over the following weeks, Patricia's tactics grew increasingly bizarre. Neighborhood children reported being offered extra allowance money to record Jake's comings and goings. Fake real estate listings appeared online, claiming homes near Jake's were selling at 40% below market value due to proximity to unauthorized airport. Patricia even organized what she called a peaceful protest outside Jake's home, where 6 of her closest allies stood wearing noise-canceling headphones and holding signs reading "Helicopters equals home wreckers" and "Pilots go home." Jake maintained his professional composure, but privately wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake moving to Oak Ridge. That was until the governor called with an urgent request that would change everything. Dawn broke over Oak Ridge Estates as Jake hurriedly packed an overnight bag. A series of flash floods had isolated several rural communities, and the governor needed his most experienced pilot for emergency supply deliveries. As Jake prepared to leave, his secure phone buzzed with a text: "Taking the state helicopter. Official seal on side. More visibility for rescue operations." Hours later, Jake landed the gleaming white official helicopter on his pad. The governor's gold seal on its side caught the late afternoon sun as Jake secured the aircraft and left for the emergency command center. The Oak Ridge Estates Community Center had never been so packed. Residents spilled out onto the patio, straining to hear as the governor addressed them from a podium hastily assembled where the refreshment table usually stood. "Communities thrive when rules serve people, not when people serve rules," the governor said, bringing his remarks to a close. "Today, we're announcing a new state initiative on HOA governance reform, and I can think of no better place to pilot this program than right here in Oak Ridge." Applause erupted as Jake unveiled architectural plans for what would become the Oak Ridge Emergency Response Center, a small but state-of-the-art facility that would house a helicopter and first response equipment, built on land donated by community members who had witnessed firsthand the value of having emergency aviation services nearby during the recent floods. 6 months later, Jake stood on the rooftop observation deck of the new center, watching as children from the local elementary school took turns sitting in the helicopter cockpit below. The field trip, now a monthly educational event, was organized by the new HOA Community Engagement Committee. "They absolutely worship you, you know," came a voice behind him. Jake turned to find Barbara Chen, the newly elected HOA president and retired judge, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one. "Not me," Jake said. "They worship the helicopter, kids and their toys." Speaking of which, Barbara said, checking her watch, "Our special visitor should be arriving any minute." Right on cue, a transport van from the minimum security women's correctional facility pulled into the parking lot. Patricia Wilkins, dressed in an orange visibility vest rather than prison attire, stepped out, looking considerably humbler than the last time Jake had seen her. Part of her community service sentence, specifically requested by Jake, despite objections from the governor's office, was to assist with the center's educational programs. Today would be her first day. Jake watched as Barbara greeted Patricia with professional courtesy. The former HOA president's shoulders were no longer rigid with self-importance but slightly curved, as if the weight of her public downfall still pressed upon them. "You really think this is a good idea?" Barbara asked, returning to Jake's side. Jake sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "Everyone deserves a second act," he said. "Besides, no one knows more about the importance of emergency services than someone who accidentally sabotaged them and had to watch the consequences unfold on national television." Below them, Patricia was tentatively approaching the helicopter, where a young pilot was explaining the basics of aviation to the schoolchildren. When invited, Patricia carefully climbed into the cockpit, her face registering something between terror and wonder as she gently touched the controls. "You know what the irony is?" Jake said, watching the scene. "If she'd just asked nicely in the first place, I would have gladly given her a ride." The new helipad, officially designated as an emergency response location, gleamed in the morning sun, its surface painted with the state seal alongside the words Oak Ridge Community Response Team. Where once stood a symbol of neighborhood division, now stood a testament to what could happen when communities learn to look beyond their fences. And as for the HOA Karen helicopter incident, it became not just a local legend, but a case study in governance training programs across the state, complete with security footage that never failed to elicit gasps from audiences, particularly the part where Patricia posed for a selfie with the governor's helicopter, evidence folder in hand, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to break. At precisely 2:17 a.m., Patricia Wilkins' security camera captured her slipping out of her house in what appeared to be black tactical gear, including a ski mask and night vision goggles purchased from a sporting goods store's clearance section. 2 similarly outfitted figures, later identified as HOA board members Walter Jenkins and Diane Myers, followed close behind, carrying garden shears, spray paint, and a stepladder. "Operation Helicopter Beacon is a go," Patricia whispered dramatically into a walkie-talkie, despite being close enough to her companions to use a normal speaking voice. The security footage from Jake's property showed the trio stumbling around the helipad, shushing each other unnecessarily before Patricia produced bolt cutters to remove the padlock on the gate. What followed was 20 minutes of methodical destruction: slashed covers, shattered glass, cut wires, and a particularly vindictive moment when Patricia spray-painted "No Flying Zone" across the cockpit. "The neighborhood is saved," Patricia declared triumphantly, taking a selfie with the vandalized helicopter, a photo that would later feature prominently in court documents. Across town, Jake's phone lit up with emergency alerts from his security system. But he was in the middle of coordinating supply drops and couldn't return until morning. By then, it was too late. Jake stood silently beside State Police Captain Reynolds as they viewed the security footage for the 3rd time. The captain removed his hat and whistled low. So let me get this straight. Reynolds said, these people destroyed the governor's personal emergency response helicopter, the same one currently being featured on the news delivering medical supplies to flood victims, because they didn't like the way it looked in their neighborhood. Jake nodded grimly as news vans began assembling outside the community gates. The story was spreading faster than Patricia could delete her social media posts, celebrating her victory over aviation tyranny. By noon, the scene at Oak Ridge Estates resembled a circus. News helicopters, ironically, circled overhead. State police had cordoned off Jake's property with crime scene tape. Neighbors gathered in stunned clusters, watching as forensic teams collected evidence, including Patricia's spray paint can, which she had helpfully labeled P. Wilkins, HOA president, with a label maker. Patricia herself was in the middle of an interview with a local reporter, still unaware of the helicopter's significance. Sometimes citizens have to take matters into their own hands, she was saying proudly when the governor's motorcade turned into the community entrance. The crowd fell silent as the governor, flanked by security and emergency management officials, stepped out of a black SUV. Cameras swung toward the distinguished figure as he surveyed the damaged helicopter, his expression darkening. Patricia pushed through the crowd, clipboard still in hand. Governor, thank goodness you're here. This man has been violating our HOA regulations with his helicopter and— You mean my helicopter, Ms. Wilkins? The governor interrupted, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent crowd. The emergency response vehicle that was scheduled to deliver critical medical supplies this morning, but couldn't because someone vandalized it. The color drained from Patricia's face as realization dawned. The clipboard slipped from her fingers, clattering dramatically on the pavement, a sound picked up perfectly by every news microphone present. But the HOA regulations clearly state, she stammered. Actually, came a voice from the crowd as Walter Jenkins stepped forward, already distancing himself. Patricia told us it was just some rich guy showing off. We had no idea it was. His voice trailed off as state police officers approached with handcuffs. The arrest of Patricia Wilkins, broadcast live across the state, would soon become known as the HOA helicopter heist, complete with footage of her being escorted to a police car still wearing her HOA polo shirt.